Hey there everybody, Mazarok here, and today I'm doing a little bit of a viewer request video, but I'm also going to be encompassing a lot of questions that I get through the Discord and YouTube on how to kind of pull around CDs, DPS CDs mainly, with healers, taking into account healer CDs and things like that, and what are the tips and tricks that I, do to kind of learn how to do this, because if you've watched any bit of my streams, I'm very fluent with my routes. Some of them are fairly rigid, but some of them are also, oh, we can just do this, and then we can do this, because I kind of have an idea of what's going on, and I have good timings and decent time. I'm not going to say good, decent timings and things like that. So obviously, people have asked, wait, how do you do this? Lower Karazhan being one, especially where I definitely am a lot more fluent and less rigid in my dungeon routing than I am anything else. So with that, I just kind of want to give the tips and tricks on kind of what I've done to prep and learn and how to work things out on the fly, because this has definitely been requested quite a bit. Before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe, all that fun jazz. I'm like, oh my god, I'm flabbergasted by all of the support in the Discord community, which there's a link to down below, filled with wonderful people, by the way. The amount of subs on YouTube, thank you so much. The channel is growing very steadily. As well, I am sorry for not being as active recently. I recently started a new job, so the kids are in school, so there's a lot of turmoil going on while I'm trying to find the new rhythm for new releases and things like that. But it is coming out. I am also restructuring the Patreon. That's going to be happening within the next 48 hours of me putting out this video. And there's a link for that down below if you wish to support me directly, as well as a Twitch link if you want to watch me stream. Let's get into it. So, how to learn how to route and pull around damaged CDs and all of that. So number one, the first thing you need to know, by the way, the first couple of these steps is a lot of prep work. We're not even getting into a dungeon yet. But if you want to learn how to pull around DPS CDs, you need to track DPS cooldowns. A lot of times I'll see people's UIs and they're like, well, wait, how do I pull around DPS CDs? And you're not even tracking them, right? That's obviously number one. You can get on the CD and open that up and just literally click what you want to track and move forward from there. But now that you've got OmniCD, or you've got another program or another add-on, OmniCD is just what I use, but there's a ton of good ones out there. Use whichever one you are most comfortable with. There's no right or wrong answer there as long as you are tracking them. So while it's nice to track CDs, you also need to have a basic idea of what those DPS cooldowns do, right? Know the difference between, a Breath of Sindragosa, Army of the Dead, Wild Spirit, Celestial Alignment, Summon Infernal, and a lot of this can happen passively. You just go look at the details meter breakdown really quickly after a big pull and you see someone has pumped like huge amounts. Go look and see what there is there. Chances are you're going to see Summon Infernal. It might not be their top damage for a Warlock because it might be Rain of Fire, but Rain of Fire is enabling Summon Eternal is enabling Rain of Fire. So you kind of sometimes got to go 2, 3, 4, 5 down on a big pull, but you'll see what that cooldown is, right? If it's something spammable, it's probably not that because they'd be able to do it every single pull, but where it's really, really big numbers, so go look for those cooldowns, or you can go look on Wowhead. Go look at Mythic plus Dungeon rotations for Destro Warlock. Open it up. Perfect. Oh, hit Summon Infernal. Okay, that's probably a cooldown. I want to track that. What does it do? Okay, cool. It literally takes 2 minutes, and you can do this for every spec in the game. And it's not that you have to remember specifically. Like, you don't have to have every super thing memorized right off the bat before getting into a Mythic Plus dungeon. You don't. But have it if you're planning on working around cooldowns and being more fluid with your route. Then you're gonna have to have a basic idea of what the biggest stuff that they do, right? Whether you're with a Windwalker monk, a Wild Spirits, or a Resident Arrow Hunter, right? Knowing which one those do. If you're pulling around Wild Spirits but the Hunter's Kyrian, there's really no point in that. So that's something that you're gonna want to do, right? It's the prep work beforehand and the knowledge that you gain from experience. There's two different ways to go about it, and it's a nice combination of both that allows you to start pulling around CDs. Step 2. So now we're getting out of the main prep work, never having gone into a dungeon or, not having tanked a dungeon or whatever. The next one is routing. Find a route that you like online. Try and learn it to the best of your ability. Look at it, kind of, you can play around with it if you want. Dratnos has a lot of really good beginner routes if that's something you're looking for. There's routes in like my Discord channel. You know, sometimes you have to ask for them because they can get pretty buried. But there's plenty of resources around to get the routes that you need, or the very basic routes of here, just do this, you know, if this is pug friendly or whatever have you not. But getting the routes and knowing them are two different things. And in Season 4, we're actually a little lucky right now where we have 6 old dungeons that don't have Mythic 0 versions of them. So what you can do is grab the route, you know, wherever, import it, look at it, and go over it pull by pull in the dungeon. You can go into Lower Karazhan right now and pull by pull do it, so you know exactly what's going on without any fear of dying, because it's an old Legion Mythic dungeon. You're just going to one-shot everything, but learning where to go is going to make things a little bit more fluid with you along the way, because as long as you know where you're going and what you're going to be pulling, things are going to be a little bit different. Now, for current dungeons like Gambit or Streets, this is something that you're going to have to just get into a key and try out, and really kind of work around that a little bit and just practice, right? Maybe go in as a DPS. I know that's tough because DPS queues kind of suck, and if you're not playing a meta spec, they've been really, really mean to non-DPS specs right now. I don't know why. Like, it's absolutely wild what's going on right now. But I mean, if you're in the Pug Finder, don't just take meta classes, man. Like, there's a lot of I'd rather have a Feral Druid with the same IO as a Survival Hunter half the time, unless I need Lust, because that Feral Druid probably knows exactly what they're doing versus the Serve Hunters 50-50. You get someone that, you know, was good that rerolled, or someone who just likes turtles. But that's that's just a thought, right? But you want to get in and you want to practice the route and familiarize yourself with the dungeon. If you don't know the dungeon at all, you're going to have a hard time pulling around CDs, because you need that dungeon knowledge to work around with. So go in as a DPS, go in as a tank, and just practice. Don't worry about DPS CDs when you're still learning, right? It's hard to max. Don't chunk off too much to try and learn at once. Go in bits. Familiarize yourself with the dungeon. Familiarize yourself with the route, and make sure that it is, you know, as solid as can be. As you're going through that, make sure that you're identifying problem pulls, especially once you start getting into higher keys, whatever that higher key is for you. 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever it is, it's different for everybody else, right? There's people out there that 20s are a joke, and there's people out there that 20s are almost unattainable. Identify that for yourself, which is fine, and identify those problem packs, right? So if you pull one pack and you're like, okay, the healer did 20k HPS on this one, holy crap, okay, this is a problem pack. You might not want to double that one up, right? And if you have 2 of those in a row, you really don't want to pull them in together, because that would be bad, because you're making things really tough. But for another thing that you could do is, if that one on its own is okay and you're getting through it with healer CDs and maybe popping a defensive, like a big defensive, you know, if you're committing the bubble taunt, final stand, paladin on that one every single time, you know that's a problem pack. If you're never having to commit a 5-minute or 3-minute cooldown to get through it, and maybe you could just commit a minute and a half, 2 minute, whatever it is, to live through it, it might not be that problematic. So, and you might be able to add in something else. For example, there's a couple of double, triple pulls that I do in Gambit, which the 2 pulls by themselves are kind of dangerous. They're fine, but adding in a pack of shore runners doesn't make them any less dangerous for me, right? The guys that run around, they don't add anything extra aside from melee attacks. So for me as a tank, knowing that that's not going to get any less dangerous, I can actually pull something more in and be fine with that. But you have to be able to identify what's a problem for you and the tank spec that you're playing, because whether it's dangerous or not does depend on the tank spec that you're playing. Certain tanks deal with certain mobs better. Plain and simple, right? Prot Warrior doesn't deal with everything as good as a DK does. DK doesn't deal with everything as good as a Prot Warrior does, right? Everyone has their bonuses, right? On what they can do and what they're bad at and what they're good at. So for whatever spec you're playing, identify what's a problem. I have different, in Season 3, I had different routes depending whether I was playing Paladin, Warrior, or Blood Death Knight, because how my cooldowns aligned for each, I wanted different things. Sometimes it was, you know, pull a little bit slower here, here, and here, and then go massive afterwards. And sometimes it's go big here, pull little, and then go big. But it all ended up at the same count with around the same time, but I need to make sure that I had my defensives to live. And then you had to worry about DPS cooldowns after. So you want to track healer CDs, things like that, and look at the meters after a dungeon's done. Not after a dungeon's done, sorry, after a pull is done. So you can see who's blasting. You can see how much the healer is having to heal. If the healer is pulling 15 to 20k HPS on a pack, good to know. That might be a more problematic pack, right? That's something you need to know. And if this is happening regularly in a dungeon where almost every time they're pulling major healing numbers to get through that you can now identify that as a problem pack, which might not be something that you want to double, triple, or even quadruple, right? You can find that elsewhere. As long as you're giving DPS the opportunity to blast, they're going to be pretty happy. Another thing that I've been doing as well is I'm not afraid to be vocal in party chat. I'll let them know, hey, this is a small pull, big pull coming up next. So that way people might not waste CDs that you might not be tracking or might not know are there or anything else like that, right? People might use a 30, 45 second CD, you know, a Resonant Arrow can be used pretty much every pull, but if the option is put Wild Spirits on cooldown, which a lot of DPS are trained just to put it on cooldown, but if you say, hey, there's a really big pull coming up after this small one, your DPS are going to be much more willing to be like, okay, all right, we'll just let this pull kind of occur and just DPS it down. Then we get to blast. You give the DPS the option to blast, they are going to take it. That's what they're there for. That's what they love doing, right? So they're not going to commit any big CDs, and that way you being more vocal is going to help along with that. Also, if you're planning on making any changes to the route, or, you know, you've got something different, say, hey, I've got a little bit of a weird route at the start of a dungeon. I've got a little bit of a weird route, but it should increase like efficiency, or it should just go smoother and increase your overall. If you tell DPS that they're going to get higher numbers by the end of the dungeon with your route, they're going to be much more willing to listen to you than if you didn't. Right? Because sometimes they'll just say, no, just stick to the main route, please, and kind of what's common. And that's perfectly fine. If you get people saying that, just do that and find another group. There's plenty of groups out there that love to experiment, and there's plenty of groups that hate to see anything different occur ever, right? There's groups that if one thing goes weird in a dungeon, and I mean like one little thing, all of their CDs, everything's fucked. They're lost. You might as well just shoot them in a cannon in fucking space because they're done. Like, absolutely they're done. But then there's some people who roll really well with those punches and know how to reset and work around their CDs to kind of maximize everything, even in, you know, non-conventional or accidentally occurred scenarios. So that's one thing you're going to have to notice. Okay, so now we're at the point you've learned to track CDs, you're comfortable with your route, you know what you're doing, and you know how to identify problem packs, you know how to identify what you want and don't want to pull, and you're comfortable around CDs. You've got all of this done. Now, how to add that fluidity, or like what steps do I take, for example, when judging whether or not I can double, triple pull, or whether I'm going to take things a little bit slower at that point in the dungeon. This is my mental checklist for seeing if I can do a big pull when you know, whether I know I can do it without a DPS telling me they have CDs, or whether the DPS says, hey, I have big CDs, I can do this. Step number 1, mental checklist. If I double or triple pull this, can I live? Can I live without insane healer assistance? Am I know that this is possible? I have my defensives. I know what's going on. I'm good. Cool. Check number 1. I've got it. I can live it. I'm good to go. 2, does the healer have enough mana and healer CDs if I'm an idiot and I fuck up? Alright, if something goes wrong and I screw up, can the healer bail me out of this? Because if you're going into a big pull and the healer has 20% mana, but they would have been fine on a small pull, and in fact would have been able to generate some for another pull, because healers do have their own ways of generating mana through, you know, whatever means. Whatever. They can drink, they can do whatever. I know, like, Smite or something for Holy Priest generates mana and weird stuff like that, whatever. I just look at the bars. If they're low, I'll ask if they want to drink first. I'll ask if whatever's going on, hey, there's a big pull coming up. Do you need mana? Whatever. Do they have cooldowns, right? Does your Holy Priest have Apotheosis or Divine Hymn or Tranquility or whatever the healer cooldown that is, do they have something? And if they have nothing and you screw up, you're in trouble. That pack is gonna go miserably, right? So you want to make sure that you can live and your healer can pull you out of the jam if you screw up. Then number 3 is check for DPS cooldowns. If one DPS has a cooldown, like a major cooldown, you can absolutely pull big and that DPS can blast. But if you know it's a big problem pack that can get deleted, but you need 2 or 3 DPS usually to like pull 40, 50k, spike at 80 or whatever the number is, and that's needed, and it's not there, don't do it. Play it safe, because at the end of the day, the DPS overall goes up when they don't die. You can't do DPS when you're dead. You're dead, less overall, right? It might seem like their overall isn't as big because you're pulling a little bit safer, but their overall is actually going to be higher than if they died. I know it's a wild concept to grasp, but guess what? You don't do DPS when you're dead. If the pull goes on when you're dead, your overall goes down. Plain and simple. You want bigger numbers? Don't die. Sometimes that means playing it safe. Sometimes that means playing it risky. But you can alleviate some of that risk by making sure you have defensives. Your healer has defensives and your healer has mana to get you out of a jam. And before you pull big, if all of your DPS CDs are on cooldown, it's probably not the time to triple pull something, unless it's a really easy pack, right? But knowing what your DPS can do. So let's take an example here. I'm going to create an example. We're going to have we're going to have a hunter, because I want to go through the 3 different hunter specs, because the 3 different hunter specs can be very, very different. We're going to have a Retribution Paladin, which is a good one, and we're going to have a Fury Warrior. Those are our 3 DPS. I'm going in, check. I've got defensives, I've got Dancing Room Weapon, I've got Shield Wall, Demo Shout, whatever the tank it is, you name it, I'm fine. The healer's got 1 major CD on cooldown, but they have a major CD ready. Not all packs require multiple healing CDs, right? So, perfect, they've got Apotheosis. First thing that came to mind, they've got Apotheosis. So you know the healer's going to be able to get you out of a jam. The hunter has Resonating Arrow. Now, survival, with the way that it works, is, yes, they have a 3-minute cooldown, but to pump, they usually don't need it, right? They pump extra hard with it, but Survival Hunter just pretty much pumps in all scenarios anyway. So whether they have Resonating Arrow, but they don't have Coordinated Assault. Alright, that's fine. Survival Hunter's good to go. Warlock doesn't have Summon Infernal. There's a minute left on the cast. And the Fury Warrior just finished up a Blade Storm, and Recklessness is on cooldown. And there is a hefty quadruple pull coming up. And you would like to do it, but you don't have any cooldowns. Don't do it. Pull one aside. You don't need to double or triple pull every time. Pull one mob aside. Do the one. Wait for something to come off cooldown, like Blade Storm or Recklessness. Perfect. Now you have 2. Then you can triple pull, right? That's the kind of mentality that you have to go, and just make a decision. Another thing that I have to say is just make a decision. Don't stall out, right? It's better to make a bad decision and be wrong about it than to make no decision. Because no decision is going to cost you time in Mythic Plus, and this time that sometimes you don't have. If you've ever missed a dungeon by 5 seconds and you stood around for 10 seconds trying to decide what to do and where to go, you cost that key, right? Because as a tank, I take full responsibility for routing and costing key. Like, if a key doesn't get timed, there might be egregious circumstances where I'm like, no, it was 1,000% this person's fault, and here is the Bible-long list of reasons why. Yeah, okay. But at the same time, even when I do that, I still partially blame myself. What could I have done better to make sure that these sorts of mistakes and this sort of bullshit didn't happen? Because as a tank, you can limit DPS mistakes. You can't fix stupid, but you can limit DPS mistakes by having a more fluid route, by making these on-demand decisions of nope. And sometimes you have to hold your ground. Just because a DPS says they have cooldowns does not mean you have to double triple pull. Absolutely does not. Because you should be tracking more things than they are. And you say, no, I don't have the defenses to live it. The healer doesn't have a CDs or a 30% mana. And there's literally only you with cooldowns. Everybody else is, everything else is popped. So no, we're not going to triple pull this pack. Sometimes you have to hold your ground. Sometimes you have to take a risk and be like, okay, well, the three of you all have cooldowns. You're going to blast. Let's go. Let's try it out. See what happens. Right? You have to take the risk and you have to try it out sometimes. But willing to take risks, knowing when not to take risks is something that's going to happen with experience, right? Pulling through the dungeon and really identifying those problem packs. When the moment you start going, that pack sucked, I hated it, you're going to start learning how to work around it. But also, when you take accountability and responsibility for yourself for a busted key, a pack going wrong, what you could have done better, don't just take accountability for it and shove it off to the side, right? Because that's just making yourself feel bad. Well, I'm a fucking idiot. I tanked this wrong and I suck. No. All right. I screwed up. What can I do? Immediately shift towards how can I make that happen? How can I make this better? Do I need a defensive for this? Do I need this? Do I need that? Do all three DPS need their cooldowns? What's going on that I can do better to make that happen? And when you start shifting towards that sort of mentality, you're going to start taking more risks. You're going to start taking less risks in certain circumstances, and you're going to just become a better player. The moment you shift to, what do I need to do to make this happen because I screwed this up and I don't want to screw this up again, you're going to start finding fixes. You're going to start getting creative. You're going to start, being like, okay, maybe this prescript here is literally what we need to get me out to fix this. Maybe it's this. And you're going to start thinking about things that can do. And the moment you start thinking about that, you've started this cycle of how can the DPS help me, but how can I help the DPS? And then you start working as a team, and you find ways to work at a team, even in pugs, right? Sometimes pugs don't want to listen, or whatever. That's a whole different conversation. But you can really work things around. And I have developed kind of this system for me, and it has equated to a lot of successful pug runs that shouldn't have been successful. Where in season 1 of me tanking this in Shadowlands, it was a dead key. Like, it was dead, hearth, whatever, but there are certain things that I've learned how to do through the steps that I've told you, and I've done this enough, like, right, I've done 600, 700, 800 keys a season, and I'm gonna probably get somewhere close to that in season 4, where I can do this mental checklist very quickly. I memorize my dungeons, I know everything that's going on, I know exactly where I'm going, and I know how to kind of work things around. I think Prideful really helped with, oh crap, we pulled this, what do we do now? I think that was a really big help, but that's a whole different discussion. But I know I've been going on for a while here, but honestly, I think there was a lot of experience to impart here, and a lot of, it's okay. Like, letting you know, it's okay. Take your time and learn this. Learn this in small chunks. Right? So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much to my patrons for all of your support. I hope you guys are having a good one, and happy tanking.